Thank you for taking the time to share these next 90 minutes together with us. Just by logging on, you're taking time and putting energy into learning about yourself and getting some support. So that's a wonderful thing. We have a really special and unique event today. Our two presenters are here to share their own experiences as mothers and professional women in their own eating disorder recovery, and to talk about navigating the challenges of parenting children during this current COVID pandemic. And it's very interesting timing that our webinar is today as we enter the month of March. And it has been, I think it'll be next week, exactly a year that we have been in this COVID pandemic period, a most unusual and challenging time. So very timely that we're talking about this today. So today's event, just to tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing, today's event is going to be a combination webinar presentation, but much more of an open discussion forum. So we really encourage you to bring your questions forward and also to share your own experiences regarding parenthood, recovery, or anything else that resonates from what is discussed today. So if you have questions, and we encourage you to bring your questions forward, please submit them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. And also you can share comments and questions in the chat box as well. And just so you know, today's webinar is going to be recorded, and we will be following up and sending it to all of you via email. It's also going to be available on Balance's YouTube channel. So without further ado, I am excited to introduce our two co-hosts and presenters to you. First, I'd like to introduce Melainie Rogers. Melainie Rogers is a certified eating disorder registered dietitian, CEDRD-S, and clinical supervisor in the treatment of eating disorders, accredited by the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals. She's the founder and CEO of Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Center and Melainie Rogers Nutrition, right here in New York City. Melainie is a professor in the Department of Nutrition and Food Studies at New York University. And as a practitioner in her own recovery, she is passionate about providing the highest quality treatment services to those struggling with eating disorders, and is dedicated to supporting others in their quest for long-term recovery. In addition to all of her professional endeavors, Melainie is a mom to a 7-year-old daughter. And next, I am excited to introduce Jennifer Kreatsoulas. She is a certified yoga therapist specializing in eating disorders and body image. She is the founder of Yoga for Eating Disorders, creator and host of Real Body Talk, an online interview talk show, and author of the book, Body Mindful Yoga. Through her virtual school, Yoga for Eating Disorders, Jennifer offers individual yoga, therapy, groups, yoga classes, and continuing education and mentoring for professionals. Her writing about her own personal journey of eating disorder recovery and professional experience as a passionate yoga therapist has been featured widely in the media. And her next book is due out later this year in 2021. So that's exciting. She's also a mom to 2 daughters, age 7 and 9. So I'm going to turn it over to Melainie and Jennifer now, and I'm going to disappear from the screen.
Leslie, thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you for those lovely introductions, and what a pleasure it is to be here with you all today, and with my lovely colleague, but also my lovely friend, Jen. We're super excited to be presenting this webinar today on motherhood and recovery in the age of COVID. And so without further ado, we've just got a couple of slides that we'll be referring to as we go along. But as Leslie certainly mentioned, we do invite you to put any questions or comments in the chat box or Q&A, and we'll be checking those throughout the webinar conversation. And we'll certainly have time at the end to really delve into this topic in more detail. So without further ado, I'm just going to share my screen here. And hoping that everyone can see that. Let's have a look. Terrific. Let me go back. So motherhood and eating disorder recovery, not an easy thing. Motherhood and eating disorder recovery, and then we add COVID, and almost an impossible combination. So just to start off, Jen and I thought that we might just, our goal here today is to be real and authentic, to offer some professional support, but also to know that for our viewers today, our listeners today, to know that, hey, this is us, this is our life, right? This is our struggle too. So to walk that line between, wanting to provide some resources for everyone today, and also to share a little bit, of just the reality that this is really tough. So, Jen, would you like to kick it off with just like, how are you doing with this all? And as Leslie said, can you believe it? We are a year in. So that was just shocking, wasn't it? Just doesn't it hit you? We've been doing this for a year.
Yeah, it does hit me. And actually, when you were sharing the slide with the title of our talk, I was thinking with a smile in my heart about 3 years ago that you and I came together and created a video series on motherhood and eating disorder recovery. And I'm curious to see how our conversation today compares to when we were talking about recovery and motherhood without a pandemic, right, on our plate. So that was a happy memory and a sobering moment, I think, right, to realize the reality of today. I want to thank everyone for being here, and it's really wonderful to be sharing this conversation with Melainie. To give you a little bit of a quick snap background, I've been on my personal healing journey for over 20 years and relapsed severely after my second daughter was born. So I definitely have a strong tie to this theme of motherhood and recovery, and how the overwhelm of keeping other people alive can contribute to a sense of needing to cope through the eating disorder. But how am I doing today, you ask? Well, I can say that my children are doing really well. They've adapted to, being home for almost a year now. We got a dog when the world shut down, so that helped. But they've adapted. And so from the standpoint of, being the mother of my family and looking around at all the people in it, I can say, okay, my family is safe. They're healthy. I'm grateful, blessed. But when I look at myself, it's a little bit of a different story, to be honest. I had COVID the end of November, beginning of December, and almost 3.5 months later, I'm still pretty sick with what they're calling long COVID or long haul COVID. There's a lot of different names floating around for it now. So I'm in this position where I'm dealing with intense fatigue and brain fog and various other symptoms, while also trying to care for my family and having to put my health and my self-care, make that the priority, right? And gratefully, I have a partner, and he is extremely supportive and picking up a lot of what I can't do. But I think as mothers, that acceptance that we can't do what we believe we should be doing for others can really hit some buttons. So I'm in a constant practice every day, excuse me, of trying to accept what I can and can't do, and tell myself that that's enough, and I'm enough, right? Whether I'm well or I'm not well, I'm still enough. So this is where my recovery work is right now. This work of acceptance for new health challenges and how they impact my family. How about you, Mo? How are you doing?
Okay. Before I jump into answering that question, though, Jen, I want to just say how grateful I am that you are finding the resources, energy-wise and mentally, to be and join me today in this very important conversation, because I know it's really hard with you with long-haul COVID. And I just want to, I'm amazed, right? Because talk about a hard time, struggling with the actual illness itself and the symptoms that you're experiencing, which is just massive fatigue. So when we think about a lot of things as far as parenting, energy is so essential. Energy to be able to take care of our kids, energy to be able to work, energy to be able to take care of our family and the home and who's getting meals and all of that. And to think that all of that for you right now, temporarily, the ability to do that is stripped away, I just can't even imagine. So I just want to just say how impressed I am that you're even here with us today. And I think it's very brave of you to share that with our viewers today, because it's a real, like, we're here, we're walking the talk. I mean, you know, we're not immune from this. This is affecting us as it is, you know, everyone who's joining us today. So thanks for that vulnerability, Jen. As far as how am I?
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I think we're all just okay, right? In the essence, in the theme of just a little bit of disclosure, because we're keeping this real. I'm based in New York. I know you're in the Northeast as well, Jen. Winters are not a good time for me. And I'm from Australia, so the winters in New York are really hard for me and always have been. I've been in New York now 20 years. I've been fully recovered for those 20 years. So, you know, when we talk about being recovered mums, and just a little bit of the story that brought us together, Jen, I went through, I chose to become a mum at the age of 43, actually. And in preparation for that, even though I was fully recovered with my eating disorder, out of respect for how we know this can work, I informed my therapist, my care team, that, hey, I'm going to be going through a pregnancy. We know that an eating disorder can get kicked up at this time during pregnancy, and certainly post-pregnancy with the pressure to get your body back. So my team, you know, we all went on, not high alert, but we all really put it on the radar front and center as a protective measure. And fortunately for me, I was able to go through that first pregnancy without any kind of relapse. But mentally, it was a very, very significant struggle of postpartum and things such as that. And I know for you, Jen, you shared that it was your second pregnancy, actually, where you relapsed into your eating disorder. So I put that out there for viewers as just kind of a little bit of the connection there around motherhood, and then the stresses of being a new mum, right? And trying to take care of yourself and figure out how to be a mum. And especially that first year where you're recovering from, you know, you've been, you know, 9 or 10 months you've been pregnant for, so that has its stress and strain. Then you go through the birthing process, oh my goodness, and then breastfeeding for those who did do that, which is just, no one tells you how painful that is. Mm-hmm. And then the sleep deprivation, so it's like a 2-year period of your life that's just like wiped off the map. With all the lovely, glorious stuff in there, but let's be real, guys, it's really hard as well, you know. And now we've got COVID, for goodness sake. So I take a deep breath, and I want to say, in line with what I just shared about how I try to be proactive with protecting my recovery with going through pregnancy. This year, I've been really mindful that this is a key risk time for relapse. This is a key risk time to go back into old behaviors, because we're overwhelmed. We're absolutely maxed out. So what I decided to do to kind of bring my story to full circle is the winters are really hard. And with all the pressures that we're under and no ability to use the different activities that you usually do to hang on to kind of, for me to get through the winter, you know, I'm always planful, and I have different things to look forward to get through the winter season. And all of that is not available to us right now. So I was just sitting at home at the kitchen table, working like we all are. And then at the end of the day, there's nothing left over. And we've got a kid to then take care of, right? Or in your case, 2 kids. There's no bandwidth, right? And so I found myself by December just feeling like I was just going under. And so again, thinking about what do I need to do here, because this is getting into kind of, this could go somewhere not good. I did some risk assessment, and then I just up and left, and not left, brought my daughter down to a warmer part of the state. So I'm down here in Florida right now for the last 2 months, which, you know, for some of you who may be listening may be thinking, A, you know, you're not supposed to travel. Yes, you're not supposed to travel. B, you know, there's privilege there. Yes, there's privilege there, but the flights are $50. And C, for me, it was a mental health decision. And also for my daughter, who was just stuck in our apartment in New York City, you know, I thought that for the benefit of my family, it was an important thing to do. So I did, and I'm so glad from a mental perspective, from the benefit from my daughter perspective. So I'm better, like better in that sense. Like if I was still in New York right now, I don't know if I would be making sense. And you know, I'm about to head back to New York, and I'm kind of proud of myself that because it took a lot for me to convince my daughter's father to give his permission for her to join me down here for part of the time. And I had to fight for that. That wasn't an easy thing. And he's been very supportive once he realized. But it was, you know, we're going to talk today a little bit about self-care, but also about the fact that we have to acknowledge what we need. And then we have to find the strength to ask for what we need. And if that falls on deaf ears, sometimes we have to insist. And that's the pathway I found myself going down, you know, in December in this decision to do something for my mental health that would help and support me and give me more bandwidth, you know. So I feel really proud of using those skills, and obviously really grateful for the fact that I could do this as well. So that's a little bit of a check-in, guys, on where we are, and later on we hope to hear from some of you guys about what you're doing. So if it's okay, Jen, what I'd like to do now is take us through a little bit of the stats around what is going on around us as a way of validating that this is not just you, and it's not just in your head, and it's not because you're not strong enough and you can't cope or whatever. Especially if you have, you know, a mother-in-law or someone like that who may be saying, well, you just have to suck it up and get through it, etc. And there's a comment here that there are so few resources for mothers, especially those past the initial pregnancy, childbearing years, and ED recovery. I feel like stories of full recovery for mothers in the 40s with school age and older kids don't exist. And it makes it feel impossible or like it doesn't exist. Do you have any suggestions for resources for someone in this stage of life? This is my first major relapse as a mum. That's from someone called, that's from Rebecca. And Rebecca, we will come back to you and discuss and answer and hopefully give some support around that in a moment. Thank you for sharing that. So, excuse me. Global pandemic and repercussions. Guys, you may be blown away by this number, but according to an article I read in the New York Times just recently, over 5 million mothers, they feel at this stage, have left the workforce in this last year because of COVID. And that is very particular to mothers, very particular to lack of childcare because of safety. I understand that, but also the homeschooling piece. And what that says to me is exactly the second point here, that unfortunately the burden of parenting and homeschooling is falling on mothers, and this is based upon some statistics and surveys that have been done. That seems kind of like, yes, of course, yes, we know that, but there's a part of me that's really angry when I see that. You know, I think we're all about equality and we're about equal relationships, yet there's some societal gaps there in supporting kids and childcare and figuring it out in a way that, why is it the mums that are all leaving the workforce? You know, I'm not suggesting that, you know, the dad should be struggling as much. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm just saying that there's a significant imbalance here that doesn't sit right with me. And possibly the third point, like, I'm not sure what our viewers today think, Jen, but is that because there's less compassionate, maybe some disconnected employers who are not trying to help and be flexible? Is there, demanding that division between home life and professional life? Is it a factor that if it comes down to the finances, like someone's got to help the kids with homeschooling, I earn more money than you, or you earn less than I do, then the person who earns the less money, has to kind of, suck it up and step out. Those are just two possibilities that come to mind, the last being very pragmatic, and I get it. But I still, I still have a lot of thoughts and feelings around that. And I think that what this is highlighting about society is obviously those gender roles, women's work, around, the value of women's work, the pay gap inequity, and that management positions are held more disproportionately by men. Because if you think about it, guys, if women were given more support, especially working mothers, if you were given more support with childcare, then, some of us who strategically are, choosing career paths that provide us with an opportunity for more flexibility to raise our families, what that can often mean is that we're in lesser paying positions as well. And so, more equity around that and more support would allow women to choose career paths that also are paying at a rate that could help to support them more. And less decision-making roles for women around work, family, life balance are just some of the things that came up for me around that. Jen, I'm wondering what your thoughts or reflections might be on some of these stats.
Well, I'm thinking about actually women at home who, since the pandemic, how many roles we've had to play at once, right? Whether you're a working mom or not, right? That there's just this situation has forced us to have to play multiple roles at the same time, and how overwhelming that is, how exhausting it is, how draining it is. It's just been like the road to burnout. I know. I certainly hit that point over the summer. And so I know this is a little different than the stats you're showing, but that's what's coming to mind for me.
Absolutely, Jen. And the summer, I think, for a lot of us was the point, right? When it first started with COVID, I think for many of us were thinking, okay, a couple of months, wow, this is bad.
Yeah.
We were all watching Italy, like what's happening in Italy, because we were trying to get a sense of, okay, if this comes here to the same extent, what's it going to look like for us? And I remember the same thing, Jen, when they closed the schools and my daughter was then at home with the homeschooling, and I was trying to run my business at the same time.
Yes.
And I remember there was a key point in June, early June, and I found myself 3 days in a row walking around on the verge of tears.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to stop and think, bit slow, and I was like, oh, I've been here before. I know what this means. This is really bad. I need to do something. And so that's when I actually sat down with my daughter's father, and I said, hey, listen, this is kind of getting serious, because he's an essential worker, so he was out every day, and so I was really bearing that dual role. And to his credit, he sat down and he said, okay, let's think outside of the box. Let's get some support in, and I was so grateful to him that he heard me without me needing to say a lot. Just sat down seriously and just said, hey, I'm like, this is not good.
Yeah.
So absolutely, Jen.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, and I'm sure people in the audience can relate. It's like having 3, 4, 5 full-time jobs all happening at once, right? And then I'm thinking about the people who are listening, who are maybe in the earlier phases of recovery, or at a phase in recovery where that in and of itself is feels like a full-time job.
Absolutely.
Right? And how tenuous it can be trying to navigate all of those all of those roles and keep recovery as a priority, because typically we turn to the eating disorder to cope with what's feeling overwhelming, right? Even though that's not the way we want to cope, that's not the healthy way to cope, that is the pattern or the habit. So yeah, my heart just goes out to people who are, listening, who really were at a point in their recoveries during this that it felt in and of itself like a full-time job.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a great point, Jen. And what was coming up for me there as you were responding to that, sharing that with us is, I hope our listeners today know this, but maybe they don't, that, eating disorders are biological, right? And the current thinking is that they're mostly genetically based, which means we inherit them. What I mean by that, guys, or we inherit the vulnerability, the genetic vulnerability. What I mean by that, guys, is it is not your fault that you develop the eating disorder, first and foremost, but our responsibility around it is to seek and get treatment, right? I do feel there's a delineation there. And our responsibility is, now that we know that we have this, to get treatment, just like you would if you found out you had diabetes, right? Okay, it's not your fault. Your responsibility now, though, is to take care of yourself. And it is a responsibility. I think that that's really essential. And then connected with that was what you were saying, Jen, about our default behaviors. Like under high stress, we go back to default behaviors because that's how our brains are literally wired, right? So I just want to really emphasize that, not because you don't have willpower or because you're weak or because you're not doing recovery well, but this is how our brains are wired. And one way I view our eating disorders is that they are a protective mechanism for when anxiety and emotions and the macro environment becomes too overwhelming. It's a way to kind of protect us. I do really have a respectful kind of view of what our eating disorders do for us. The kicker, though, as Jen said, is that they're dysfunctional because they're harmful. So they're protective, but they have a harm component to them that can, devastate our lives. So therefore, it's not a great choice, but it is how our brains are wired, and we need to be aware of that. And I think respectful of that, so that we're not kicking ourselves and beating ourselves up if we're really struggling right now.
Can I just share something
Yeah.
that I'm hoping people will relate to? I was having this similar conversation with one of my yoga therapy clients recently, and expressing the idea that, when those habitual thoughts show up or those urges show up, right, it's like a messenger wanting to get our attention, right? That something needs our attention. And my client said, oh, it's like a check engine light, which I just love, right? It's like that thought comes in, that urge comes in, right? It's a check engine light. Something needs your attention in your life.
Absolutely.
So I just want to pass that on in case that's helpful to people.
That is a beautiful way a really clear way of presenting that, Jen. I love that. All right, I am going to move on to our next slide here. So parenting then in this crazy, crazy time. No, it's not just you. It is absolutely really hard. And I was talking to a therapist, colleague and friend just yesterday. She was talking about how this is this is existential what we're going through, right? So we all, to some degree, deal with the reality that we're going to die one day. But with COVID and a pandemic, it's ever present around you. So your stress around just basic survival is here every single day. And then you're trying to deal with regular life stresses in addition to that. Like, no wonder we're all kind of flowing over. And honestly, in the last 2 months, I feel that people have just flipped out. I've noticed behaviors in people that are a little bit more less predictable, or I don't know what's going on, but I have noticed, I think maybe because it's that way, we're at the 12-month mark, we've gone into a new year, and we're like, oh, we're still here, so it's tough. So parenting in the pandemic, it definitely requires some reframing around how we view our parenting goals, even our parenting style. And I think the big thing here is to honestly give ourselves a little bit of a break. But firstly, I think an important question to ask ourselves is, what is realistic? And for a lot of us in recovery, Jen, we struggle with 70-80% of us struggle with anxiety and or depression and perfectionism. And this is not a time to be, this is a time, let me put it this way, this is a time as best you can to check yourself around perfectionism with your parenting and to let it go. I mean, a little bit of my mantra right now is good enough parenting is good enough. And so I'm kind of, my daughter is healthy and robust and, I try and obviously give her what I can, but I can't give her everything because then I'll have nothing left and I have to make sure that I keep us afloat. I need to keep the equilibrium. I need to keep us emotionally steady. I need to keep us, financially steady in food and sleep and routines and all of that. And if I'm going under, I can't provide that steady platform for us, So perfectionism, I think, is something that could be very toxic right now with parenting. So being realistic, what can you do and what can you let go of? Here's an example, Jen. I know a lot of people have leaned into cooking right now. Yeah, I've leaned away from cooking right now. I'm a nutritionist, I know, but I'm ordering a lot because I don't have the bandwidth, I wish I had more opportunity or more energy, but I just don't. What about yourself, Jen, just on that piece about being realistic?
Yeah, I'm certainly with my current health situation, just walking down the stairs is effort. So, beyond that it's just a moment to moment thing for me that I have to check in with. And yesterday I felt a little more with it, and told myself, oh, okay, great. While dinner's cooking, I'll fold the laundry that's in the dryer, because we did laundry in the morning, and then that time of day came and I thought, no, it can wait till tomorrow. And I'll check in with myself today. And if it has to wait till tomorrow, it'll wait, because I just think, all right, everyone's basic needs are met, right? And so as long as everyone's basic needs are met, I can say that's enough. And anything else is kind of icing on the cake. So for me, it's I have to be really checking in with myself, being very purposeful in what I choose to do. And so maybe this is in some way a gift, right? To slow me down, to have to really practice letting go of not folding the laundry when I think it should be folded because I want to do it my way perfectly, right? Yeah, I think letting go what doesn't have to be done is perfectly okay.
Absolutely.
What the flip side is, then you are giving yourself something. Maybe it's some energy, maybe it's some stillness, maybe it's attending to something else that is more enjoyable, right? Maybe it's connecting with nature. Maybe it's going in your bedroom, closing the door, and not talking to anybody for an hour, right? So nothing's lost by saying this can wait. Maybe something can be gained, right? And it's small, but it's something.
Yeah, it is those small moments. I think that's exactly what's happened, Jen, is finding those small moments, those small things that you like to do, that give you pleasure, that are cathartic, whatever it might be for you. And as you're suggesting, folding the laundry, it's not igniting the spark. And if it's not essential, then kind of leave it. honestly, right?
It really is okay.
And to your point, at the very beginning of the pandemic, I don't know if people remember, but it was overwhelming on social media, friends, and in whatever media about, people are embracing the pandemic time to write their next novel. Well, sorry, I know you're a writer, Jen, so that
Oh,
might
no,
be
don't worry.
Yeah,
It was hell
But-
trying to write a book during the
yeah.
pandemic.
So, I'm going to do this with my COVID time, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to get in the best shape of my life with my COVID time. And there was all of this stuff going on, and I had a real moment of feeling overwhelmed, like, oh yes, we've got all this time, I should be doing all these things. And then I was like, I just don't, even though I may have the time and I'm sitting here, I don't have the bandwidth. I am so exhausted emotionally and physically and mentally. And so then the guilt started to come in, right? Like, I'm wasting time, I'm not being productive, I could and should, the shoulds. And so, Jen, what I had to do is, because I found my thoughts were really starting to rev up, which can happen with our anxiety, right? So I'm watching that, observing that, and thinking, I can't do this for the long, this is not sustainable. So I had to come up with a mantra for myself to just help me prioritize, which you just touched upon, to remind myself to bring it in and keep it doable. And so the mantra that I shared with you actually was the 3 S's, just because it was easy to remember with COVID brain fog kind of situation. The 3 S's. The first priority is safe. Okay? Is my daughter safe? Am I safe? Are we safe? That is priority 1, nothing else matters. So safety. Doing a new yoga thing. I know you're a yoga instructor, and again, that's replenishing for you. I struggle with yoga. I don't have a regular routine. This is not a time to start having a regular routine. Like, that felt stressful. It didn't feel restorative for me at the time. So safe. Nothing else matters, just safe, right? The next one was sane. And I found that all this pressure to write the next book or learn this language or learn a new yoga routine or start meditating was just too much. So I had to shut it down, because I couldn't keep my equilibrium and I couldn't keep my focus on safe, sane. And then the third S is sober, and I just used sober because it's an S word. But what I meant by that is any behavior that we may use as a crutch that causes us distress because we're using it. Like, we don't want to use it, but we are finding that it's a default behavior, and it leaves us feeling worse about ourselves as a result. So the 3 S's, that was, again, just an easy acronym so I could remember what the mantra was. And we'll talk a little bit about that piece later around self-care. But so to your point, Jen, I had to bring it down, shift it down, and just keep it close to my chest and block out all the noise, because there was so much noise. There still is. So again, I think, if I shall move on here, Jen, the reminding ourselves that they are unique. It is a unique time. This is crazy, crazy stuff, and it's not a normal time. Again, therefore, normal parenting is maybe not applicable right now. You have to figure out your own way of doing this right now. That makes sense. A time of maintaining stability and not increasing pressure on yourself. And so that was really my way with the 3 S's, right? Find your new equilibrium as best you can, right? And then try and function from that place. And it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be beautiful, And to your point, Jen, those are being torn in multiple directions and being, and misunderstood. We've got childcare, work, maintaining the household. This is a time, I think, for us to really step up and use our voices and ask for help, and ask our partners, if we have partners, let them know what we need, right? Because toxicity can certainly build up there if we think our partner knows what you need, but maybe you didn't communicate it with clear words. A time to think about our communication style. And I was thinking of DBT, Jen, for those who've gone through formal recovery treatment, where you've gone through DBT skills, dear man, how to clearly articulate what your needs are, and as a way of trying to get your needs met.
Yeah.
Definitely challenging mum guilt and self-critical thought patterns. Not helpful, guys, and I think it only takes us further down the rabbit hole and into just really toxic places. I think this is the time to really lean into the reverse of that and really be your own champion. I don't know what other way to do it other than, you know, us doing this webinar today is really to say, we see you, we're in it with you, and this is a time where we really need to protect and bolster ourselves mentally and physically. Because if we don't, who else is going to do that? You know, we can't expect others to take care of ourselves at this very basic level. We have to be our own advocates. And then, you know, guys, it's okay to say there's nothing in the day that's restorative. You know, and you know, the second one here is I hate parenting right now. And I have to say there are moments when I really, really feel that way. It's okay to say that. I mean, I think it would not be authentic if you said, oh yes, I love parenting all the time. Who loves it when kids having a tantrum and a meltdown and they're missing their friends, or they don't like Zoom because they can't touch and feel their friends like they normally do, and teacher didn't see me raise my hand and so now I feel rejected. I mean, it's intense stuff. And then of course constantly fighting with your kids. I found that certainly escalated for me, or your partners, and both. And so it's, imagine trying to keep our equilibrium with all of this craziness going on, guys. It's no wonder we're exhausted. Jen, any comments there?
No, let's keep flowing.
Right. So into practicing self-care. So what do we do about this? We know we're validating today that yes, this is real. Yes, you are absolutely, understandably exhausted. And yes, as the mother, you are possibly, probably, for many statistically, carrying more of the burden than you need to be or should be. So when we talk about self-care again, I just want to go back to what I was saying earlier about my example of determining that I needed to get out of the cold, dark New York environment because that affects me from a seasonal affective perspective, and I needed to get towards sunshine. And I didn't have the ability to go home to Australia, which I usually do over Christmas, New Year. And so just for those who may remember, Australia's in the Southern Hemisphere, so it's summertime down there. And so that was always my kind of little top up over the summer. And that's not available to us right now because Australia is not allowing international flights. And I wouldn't get on a plane for 24 hours anyway. So coming down here to Florida was, you know, kind of a compromise or just some kind of way of trying to think outside of the box. But I had to fight for it because there were other people involved in making this maneuver. And it was hard. But I just knew that I needed to do this for myself in order for me to maintain equilibrium. So again, today is not about just Jen and I. We're only sharing our stories as a way of hopefully being helpful in the sense of, you know, this stuff is tough and you kind of have to stand up for yourself around it, you know. You know, and it points here, especially for those people who are in a relationship with a partner, recognizing when you're getting overloaded, to help stave off that resentment that can build up. And then you're in close quarters with each other and it can really lead to a great deal of toxicity and fighting and being miserable with your relationship, as well as, you know, kind of miserable in general around our circumstances, and then, you know, being overloaded as a parent. What a tough combo. And some examples here that you may be able to flag for yourself. Your patience is getting shorter, you're snapping, you're avoiding interactions or isolating, breath getting shallow, racing thoughts. But I definitely noticed that I was getting very short with my daughter, for example. And I had a moment, Jen, in June where I sat down on my bed and started crying. And I just thought, I feel like I'm the worst. I am not parenting in a way that I always hoped I could parent and want to parent, and work hard to parent in this way. And now I feel like I'm, doing all the things that I hoped I would never do as a parent. And, so there's all of that stuff going on. So identifying what you need, and then my 3 S's: stay safe, sane, and sober. Jen, what about you around self-care?
Yeah, I think a couple things I'd like to offer on this topic is that I think this lifestyle that we're living right now can take on a life of its own, right? It has its own pace. And I think as moms, we're kind of like the glue, or I don't know what the right metaphor is right now, but we're often the ones keeping the circus going, right? And so sometimes when that happens, I find in talking to others in recovery, that what happens is caring for that recovery gets scheduled around caring for everybody else versus scheduling caring for everybody else around recovery. And so I would say if you're feeling like you are just swept up and there's no time, or it's become a crutch to have no time to eat breakfast, right? And you're in that habit, right? Because like, oh, but I got to take care of the kids. I got to get them, got to do this. I got to do that. Maybe this is a time to kind of recommit to shifting your mindset so that you're planning your recovery around taking care of other people. So you're planning your meals, right? You're planning your appointments, you're planning the things that you need in your life to stay well within the constraints of this time that we're living in. And so I just want to offer that because sometimes we forget, we just get caught up about taking care of everybody else. But caring for yourself is always the priority. Like Melainie has said, protecting recovery has to be number one. And something that I do personally that I have found very helpful in holding myself accountable to self-care is every morning I do some reflection, and then I make a short list of what I intend to do for my self-care that day. And there's something about just naming these things, writing them down, acknowledging that standing in the sun or feeling the sun on my face is self-care. It doesn't have to be grand, right? Or I bought myself a heated blanket, and part of my self-care is using my heated blanket, taking my vitamins, like just even the things that you're doing, just name them, because you'll show yourself that you are caring for yourself, and then you're making time to name the things that you want to bring into your day. So I really recommend that practice. Start a ritual. Start creating that time for yourself.
Jen, I so love that you touched upon that, the micros, right, and how important they are, because so much of the bigger things are just not available to us. And there is a gratitude piece here, and it is surprising how the small things can really impact you. I love what you shared. I bought myself a new coffee mug because I was using a coffee mug. I love my coffee in the morning, guys. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but isn't it interesting that I was using this coffee mug and it just didn't hold the right quantity, and it didn't feel good. I just didn't like it. It was just distracting from the pleasure of me having my coffee in the morning. So I went and I bought myself a new coffee mug, and I love this coffee mug.
Yeah.
But again, isn't it amazing how that simple thing, $2 purchase or whatever it was, it just helps with that whole ritual in the morning that is so soothing, just for those couple of minutes, and
yes.
And again, it's that, it's the small things. I bought a fragrant candle that I have that I like to light at night. Just the fragrance of it just helps me to remember to breathe. Again, small things I think are they don't have to be grand. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jen, we've had a couple of questions and comments come in. Would this be a time for us to tap into those? So let's have a look here.
Um, um, okay, so the first one, this is actually a really good one, directly related to this, and there's a couple there I'll go back to. So this is from Naomi. Naomi says, "I'd be grateful if it's possible to hear about how and if it makes sense to communicate with kids. Mine are ages 8, 6, and 4 years old about ED recovery." So how and if it makes sense to communicate with kids about ED recovery. Thoughts on that, Jen?
I think it's such an important question. It's one I'm asking too, because I have not gone there with my children yet. So I don't think I can speak from experience on this one, to just speak clearly, perfectly honest. But Melainie, I'd love to hear your professional guidance.
Yeah, I'm really thinking it through, Jen, and a couple of things that come up for me around the essentials of recovery, right? Like protecting your recovery. The very first thing that comes up for me is keeping with your meal plan, because if your meal plan or your eating plan starts to go out the window, for example, you're too busy and rushed in the morning and you skip breakfast or you skip lunch, or it's too crazy at dinner time and you don't get to have dinner and you have snacky things, that is such a foundational piece, because from that comes not just maintaining your body biologically, but it's about nourishing your brain so that you have literally the nourishment to cognitively work through the stress and process stress and take care of yourself from a psychological, emotional perspective. So I'm just thinking about that in relation to saying to your kids, mummy needs to eat now, or mummy needs to have a snack now, or whatever. I'm wondering, I know that that's at a very basic level. I don't know if I would need to say, especially at those ages, knowing me, I don't know if I would need to say that it's because of my eating disorder, or rather just, mummy needs to eat now because I'm hungry. I mean, we could also say that I'm using food and the eating as one basic way, but it may be that you just need a break because you feel that you're unraveling. I think if the kids were older, it could be a conversation. I wonder at their young age if they may not understand it. And I think there might be other ways that you could still say that mummy needs this without it having to be because I have an eating disorder. That's where I'm going with my gut here. But of course, this is a conversation and I don't know that there's rights and wrongs here. But again, it comes back to saying, I need this, And Naomi, I don't know if this helps, looking at the age of your kids. My daughter last year during this, we're still in it, but she was 6 last year and she hadn't learned how to read the clock yet. But I needed certain periods of time for her not to interrupt me, whether it be for work or even if, or whatever. So I taught her how to see where the hands are on the clock or the digits, and I wrote down the digits, okay, so in 15 minutes, you can interrupt me after 15 minutes, and this is what it will look like on the clock. And when the numbers are 3, 1, 5, you can come and interrupt me. Let's say it's a meeting or whatever it was. And so that's how I helped my daughter to not interrupt me all the time when I was homeschooling and working from home. Next one here is from Emily, how do you weigh mental health, seeing friends, doing activities, going to museums with protecting your family from COVID? When my partner and I disagree on this, we always default to what's safest for COVID. I'm starting to feel like I need to push back on this and I need to ask for more balance and more socialization, but feel guilty putting our family at risk. Emily, you hit it on the head. That's exactly what we are contending with here. Jen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I so relate. It's, I don't feeling afraid of the world, right? But at the same time, I'm afraid of the world, right? And I'm afraid of, for their health. I think there's no right answer. I think that's my thought, that there's no right answer. There are only the answers that are right for you and your family, right? And having those hard conversations with your partner, I've had to have a few in this area as well. They can be really uncomfortable, right? Because there are no right answers. Everyone just has their idea or their opinion or their hunch, right? Or what they see other people doing. I feel for you. It's a hard one. I think there is value in socialization. I think there is value in being in the world and showing children they don't have to be afraid of it. And I think it comes down to the choices of choosing where you spend your time and what is your comfort level with risk, right? Like, what is your risk comfort level? And no matter what your answer is, it's not right or wrong. It's just trusting that.
Yeah, absolutely. And well spoken, Jen. I think that the difficulty there is that what I've heard from some of my clients is that if one partner has less risk tolerance and therefore is not willing to take risks and not go to someone's wedding or whatever, even if it's outdoors or whatever, because it's a gathering of people that are not in our bubble, where my client's partner is like, that's overkill and you're neurotic, and can really get into some not very nice stuff. I mean, if it's helpful to you, Emily, when the weather was more decent, I would take a 6-foot socially distanced, masked up, and lots of hand sanitizer, walk with a friend, and then we would sit on separate park benches and have our coffees together. And that was one way that I stopped from going insane before the weather got bad in New York. The other thing I did was I took a city bike ride with a friend, masked up, lots of hand sanitizer, 6 foot apart. But as soon as it got really, really cold, we weren't able to do that anymore. And so that's when I found it extremely hard. For my daughter, I live in an apartment building in New York, and our next door neighbor, they have 3 little ones, and they're dear friends of ours. So when this started, we went into a bubble together, and we actually had conversations around getting tested and not having any other family members or friends come into either of our bubbles. Because if they connected with someone else outside of their bubble, that puts them at risk, which puts my daughter and myself at risk. So it was a weird conversation, but one that needed to be had. In the same as, if you're dating around safe sex, I mean, sorry, but it is that. The museums right now, they're ticketed. I actually went to a museum for the very first time this weekend, and I was really impressed. Again, I double mask, lots of hand sanitizer. They give you a ticket, and there's a time slot that you go. I did a lot of research around it. So again, finding some middle ground. A lot of just walks with friends. It's really hard for the kiddos though, because they're not going to socially distance. Yeah. A next one here, which is a little bit more around when our kiddos are not neurotypical, and also I'm cisgender, but if we're dealing with if we have trans people, etc. Let me read the question so that you can hear what it says. What if you have a partner who has a lack of training and understanding of children and people who are not neurotypical, and or I think cisgender? So some added components there. Jen, any thoughts on that?
I feel like I want to ask a follow-up question.
Sure.
is it related to specifically to recovery, to parenting, to both? Maybe there's a scenario that we could understand.
Sure. Maybe it's asking for a little bit more context. So I'm just
So for who asked, I apologize for asking for more for more of a question, like more information to go with the question.
Yeah.
I want to be able to offer the best answer I can. That's
sure. And the answer there from our participant is both.
Both. Yeah. So how to find the language about mental health, how to find the language about what we need during COVID, right?
Yes, with someone who has the understanding and maybe with the added complexity of a kiddo who is not neurotypical, so therefore there's added needs there, and honestly added pressure because so much more time and attention I would need.
Yes.
I would imagine you would need to be
Yes.
focusing on your kiddo, you know.
Yeah.
So,
I can share, that's not my personal experience, but my sister is in this scenario, and I've watched her find resources of, they're taking a risk and bringing people into their home, but
right.
helping for her child to have the attention and care that he needs. Certainly she's doing her part, but for her mental health, right, she needs some space. She needs to restore. She needs to focus on her recovery. So maybe having a conversation with a partner about, what would we be comfortable with in terms of getting some more support. Maybe there are virtual programs. Maybe there are virtual groups for the person who asked the question. I would say maybe this is an opportunity to just bring in more support. And I'm sorry, I'm not good at offering some specifics here, but it sounds like having the conversation about what you need and why you need it is a really valid thing.
Totally agree, Jen. Totally agree. I would. That's the whole risk assessment piece, right? That I can't even imagine the added challenges there as far as from your own energy, your own bandwidth, your own emotional resources, trying to make sure that your child is getting their needs met.
Yeah.
And I agree, because actually what we did, if it's helpful, again, I know Jen and I are sharing a lot today, but it's in the spirit of trying to normalize this and decisions that we make. And after a lot of kind of unraveling that we've been talking about, we decided to bring our babysitter into our bubble. And everyone went and got tested, etc. And our babysitter lives on her own. And we talked about kind of, outside of when she's not at our house, her safety measures, etc. And she's very, very careful. So we felt that it was worth the risk of bringing a babysitter in to support us, so that, we could, keep our sanity, honestly, with the homeschooling and working from home in my case. So that's an example of breaking, bringing someone else into a bubble and trying to do it in a safe way. Because we can't do it all, we just, and we're not being bad mothers if we can't, by the way. So sorry, Jen.
And I'm just thinking, the piece around, when the partner isn't easy to communicate with, maybe if you have a therapist or a trusted support person that could mediate a conversation even, right?
Yes.
Around helping you express where you are, what you're going through, and what you need. Sometimes having that third person there, professional, can help that.
Sure. The next question from Maya is, how do you prevent your eating disorder from impacting or influencing your kids' behaviors? Jen, you want to go first on that one?
Yeah. For me, when I came out of treatment after my relapse, I was very determined to kind of take my experience and turn it into an opportunity to be a role model for my kids. Because there's nothing that crushes me more than thinking about my daughters going through what I went through, right? And so I don't. I am very about modeling and normalizing eating, being very mindful of the language that is used around food and around bodies, around exercise. So I think for anyone listening, your experience, your lived experience is so rich, right? You've learned so much along the way. You know the traps and dangers of diet culture and the different messaging that's out in the world. And so embracing this as an opportunity to say, no, that like doesn't come here, right? I'm not going to show that to my kids. I'm going to create the strongest foundation I can, because they will have to face those messages eventually. But for me, I pray that if I create a strong foundation at home where I'm modeling, good behaviors around eating, I'm not talking negatively about food, I'm not using moral language around food, like good or bad, that just sets them up to have a stronger, balanced relationship with themselves. And it also keeps me walking my talk, right? So maybe embracing this as an opportunity to do that for your children.
Because they watch us. Sorry, go ahead.
They watch us. And trust me, I'm not trying to sound like I'm on some high horse right now. I don't want to minimize the feelings of the fears around the eating disorder in the home, or the struggles of having to eat when you feel overwhelmed in front of your family. I'm not minimizing it at all. It's real, I understand. I'm just saying maybe it's an opportunity to embrace showing up within yourself in these ways that you want what you want for your children.
Absolutely. So Jen, you've mentioned, visibly having your meals with your family if you can, or let your kids see you eating, etc. And the other one that I would add to that is watch your self-critique of your body. And especially, so here's something that came up a lot this year. We were not doing our usual active lives. A lot of us were trapped at home and not going to the gym, not just walking. I live in New York, so we walk a lot, just part of our life, our day to day. And so people were noticing that their bodies were changing. And I'm sure everyone heard on social media the COVID-19 or whatever they were calling it. And so there was added stress and anxiety around that. Why I'm bringing that up is because I think for many of us, we could have fallen into the trap of starting to verbalize out loud, oh my goodness, I can't believe I put on weight. Oh my goodness, right? Natural kind of understandable societal conditioning to do that. But your kiddos are hearing this. And so just to be, again, mindful around trying to not make comments around body shape and size and weight, and being careful about, if you've got a full-length mirror, not doing all the body checks that your kids might see you doing. So those are a couple of ways where you can try to protect your kids a little bit by having your own self-awareness around, what you're doing, because they may not say anything, but my goodness, don't they see us doing these things, If that feels okay there, guys, we want to do a couple of other questions here. Our person who, sorry, it's anonymous actually, our person who was talking about the neurotypical kiddos and also cisgender or other sexual orientation or identity, responds and said, we only just got approved for services for our child with Down syndrome. My goodness, so you've gone through this whole year with our services. That's crazy. But I'm so glad that you finally did get some. And the next comment also is they have another child with ADHD. And then I'm not sure what the last comment there is about the autism there, but 3 kiddos, that's a lot to handle, a lot of special needs there. And that must be incredibly difficult to be managing that. Another question here is any advice from Valerie, any advice on giving yourself grace during the first trimester with the food aversions and cravings while also trying to recover and having the energy for the day-to-day with a toddler? Wowza, Valerie, that's a lot. May I take first stab at that, Jen?
Yeah,
because I had my first experience, Valerie, around this, my own experience around this. So I'm fully recovered, and I told you guys a little earlier that I kind of had my team ready if I started to notice any kind of eating disorder thoughts and concerns come up, particularly around the shift in our eating patterns. In the first trimester, when I went to do my checks with my OBGYN, she put me on the scale and she said, "Oh, you've gained a lot of weight. I'm not kidding you." And I had the moment of, I am so glad that I'm fully recovered that I can just let that comment go, because I was eating 110% intuitively. My hunger had increased and my food variety had decreased to eggs with hot sauce and hot dogs from the local hot dog stand at the park on the corner. And I'm a nutritionist. I know there's nitrates in that hot dog, but I did not care. I needed that hot dog with mustard and ketchup, and I needed eggs with hot sauce. And that's all I feel that I ate in the first trimester. I couldn't tolerate anything else. So Valerie, I want to say it's very normal for food preferences to change and to have food aversions because of the nausea and to have cravings. And so here's the trickiest thing here is to try to stay true to your intuitive hunger and fullness. If that's not available to you because of where you are in your recovery, i.e. you don't trust it enough, I would highly recommend you work with a nutritionist during this time, because then you can work on kind of, are you hungry there, or are you binging there, or are you deliberately avoiding here, etc. If that support might be helpful. And then you've got a toddler, so the energy piece there is, I would get some help. Honestly, I just don't know how you did it, Jen. You went through, you had your second child and obviously had a little one at home at the same time. How did you manage that?
Yeah, I even though I was recovered, I had my team on board to help me navigate, because it gets so confusing, right? When all of a sudden you have food aversions, and then the narrative becomes, wait a second, like, is this an aversion or is this the eating disorder, right? Or you're craving, like, oh, wait, is this a craving or is this the eating? It can just get so confusing, right? And I say, give yourself grace for that reality, that it can get confusing, and having support, having someone you trust to kind of parse through the confusion is really important. And I have a client right now who is pregnant, probably about 2 months, maybe a little more. And a lot of the conversations we're having right now are around facts versus stories, right? So we know it's a fact that in pregnancy, we can have aversions and cravings, right? We know that's a fact, right? The story is what we create around, like, oh my goodness, this is the eating disorder and I'm going to hurt my baby. And what if this, what if that, what if I gain too much weight? What if, all those stories, right? And that separates us from what we know to be true for ourselves, right? So I would say one way to help with the confusion is or giving yourself grace would be, what facts can you anchor into around what you're going through that's related to pregnancy, that is common to, this time in one's life. And when the stories show up, to get support around working through those, because they're real and they matter. It's just that staying stuck in them is what creates the suffering, right?
Absolutely, Jen. Jen, next question. Do you have some suggestions around mindless eating at home during COVID. Very, very common. This is from Marnie. Marnie, so many people are finding that they're turning to food for pleasure and to zone out, etc. Any suggestions?
Melainie, why don't you take this one, since this is probably a conversation you have often with
Sure.
clients.
Sure, absolutely. So again, I want to normalize it and I want to validate it for you, Marnie. And again, if you think about what we were talking about earlier about, you know, the activities, the normal things that we have in our lives that give us pleasure, that replenish us, that restore us, that make us feel good, and so much of that is totally being cut off from us, to the point that we're getting excited about a new coffee mug at this juncture. And that's okay. So if you think about that, it makes such normal sense that our brains would be going towards food, especially again, if your brain is wired that way. Now, for some of us, our brains are wired that mindless eating and food consumption gives us pleasure and maybe takes us a little bit, it's a little bit of escapism as well that can happen in that scenario. And for others, the brain is wired that when I don't eat, I feel less stressed, right? So when I eat, and sometimes when I overeat, I feel less stressed. And for others, their brain is wired that when I don't eat, I feel less stressed. And it's actually got to do with serotonin production as a result of those two activities. So if you're mindless eating, know this, it's because it's eliciting a chemical response that feels good, and it might also be taking you into a little bit of a zoned out place. So now that we understand why we might be doing it, and that it comes from a place of I just need a break and I need something nice, all right, let's take some of the shame and guilt and pressure out of it. So we probably don't want to be doing it though, because you probably then feel really bad and distressed about the fact that you're doing it. So a couple of things to do then is anything, Marnie, and again, I don't know any context around this of what you may or may not be doing, but some things I've been talking to my clients about, depending upon their relationship with food, are going back to journaling down your food, so that you're trying to bring more awareness around when you're eating. And when I say journaling, I mean just writing down maybe the time that you have your meal or your snack. You don't have to write down all the food, you know, if that doesn't feel good. Again, mindfulness around it. Being mindful of, okay, I'm starting to think about the ice cream in the freezer. What do I really need right now? Do I really, really want the ice cream? And the answer could very well be yes. Or it could be no, because I'm angry at my partner, I'm angry with the kids, I'm stressed out, I deserve this, I'm bored. You know, go through all the emotional stuff, like what is this really about? And you may say, I'm bored and I'm stressed and I want to zone out, so I'm going for the ice cream. Okay, and that's okay too. There's awareness around it, so you know that you're deliberately using the ice cream because of all these emotions, all right? So that's the next level. And then the next level above that is if you have the energy to say, okay, I'm bored and I'm angry and I'm stressed out, the ice cream's there, but maybe I need to take a walk, or maybe I'm going to take a bath and I'm going to ask my partner to take the kids right now, or whatever. And so what you can do is you can reverse engineer your day to know what are the factors that lead you to that place where you end up mindlessly eating. And then you feel worse about yourself. So is it because I didn't get out of the apartment this morning and that sets me up badly? So then how can you figure out a way to get out of the apartment in the morning, or walk down the stairs, or whatever it might be? And so again, you reverse engineer and try and put a couple of just small things in your day that have a greater ability to then not need the mindless eating. Again, just another thing. You know, some of my clients that right now, it's like, I'm just going to put a post-it note on the freezer. Or I'm not going to buy ice cream for right now. I usually am able to have ice cream in my freezer, but right now, because everything, I just can't. So I'm just going to take it away for just right now, and it'll come back when things are a little easier. So those are just a few A few things around how you might consider navigating it. Jen, anything you wanted to add there?
I think everything that you said, and this is one of those check engine light moments, right? Like,
Yes,
this is just a check engine light. This is a message. Something needs your attention. You're feeling something. Something is triggering you. Like, there's just something that needs your attention, and compassion for what you're going through, compassion for how it's showing up in your life, and to remember that that action doesn't define you.
absolutely. Gosh, we have had so many questions. I'm aware that we've only got a few minutes left. So what we have here in our chat box, guys, is a couple of recommendations. Let's have a look. Let's have a look here. Okay, great. So first of all, some resources for people, Jen, because I know we're almost finished for time. Valerie, who just asked our last question, also makes a recommendation for a support group. It's called Lift the Shame. Now, this is in your chat box, guys, if you want to check it out. Lift the Shame is a support group that meets on the third Sunday of the month for any mothers wanting peer support. And she goes on to say that I just joined for the first time 2 days ago, and it was helpful to share our struggles. What a great group. So that's called Lift the Shame. Let's have a look here. Shari Lynn asks, what are the 3 S's again? Safe, sane, and sober. Sharon shares that she bought a new coffee mug too. Go, Sharon. It seemed like a small treat just for me and achievable. Exactly. And
Love it.
That's what we're all about today. Small treat just for you and achievable. And then in the chat, just so you know, Leslie has put in, Jen, all of your contact information and your website, Jen, as well as ours. Okay, let's have a look here. Okay, let's have a look. And then Leslie has put in a link. I believe it is for the Lift the Shame online support group. So the link is in here in your chat box as well, if you want to check that out, guys. And then also just to know that there are articles online at NEDA, which is the National Eating Disorder Association, NEDA. There's also ED-Hope and other websites that are on this topic as well. And Ellen Satter, she's a wonderful RD, guys, who helps around how to feed our kids in a helpful, supportive, nourishing way, but not too much, and also, not in a disordered way. Ellen Satter is her name, and she's got some great helpful info for parents around, feeding our kiddos, etc. And of course, we'd love to hear from you all if you have any further questions. But I guess we should wrap it there, Jen. Those are the end of our chat questions and our Q&A. So I guess what I want to say is a big thank you to you, Jen, for joining me today on this really important conversation at this 1 year marking with being mothers in recovery and with COVID. And also thank you to Leslie for being our moderator today and support person. And of course, last but certainly not least, to everyone that took the time to join us today for, again, a very important conversation where we're all really doing it hard at the moment, and it is so important to take care of yourselves. Jen, any last words?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Melainie and Leslie, and I'm looking forward to another conversation soon.